Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And um, Welcome to the Sacred Brew with Khalid. It's my love for coffee and our deen sort of in one, and hence Sacred Brew. Thank you very much. I got a lot of feedback and DMs from the video that I shared last week. In fact, or just prior to this one, and it's been very transformative for myself as well, as I begin to share some of my experiences and some of the wisdom that has been shared with me through some of the mashayikh and just teachers around me, really. But this is the Sacred Brew, the attempt of bringing the coffee, spiritual transformation, and the deen together all into one. And really to talk about things that really have mattered to me and still matter to me, and we will have interviews with teachers, with people who are in the world of research. We will talk about parenthood, marriage, lifestyle, health, wellness, some of the things that are really close to me. I am in Melbourne right now. That's where I'm speaking to you from. It's autumn here in Melbourne as we speak, and really delighted to be with you today. There was something that I wanted to talk about today that came up very recently as a result of something that was shared by a Pakistani actor um, on a drama series that is running at the moment. And there was a comparison, or there was something that was said in relation to Salah and depression. And the comment was, Salah is not a cure for depression. And I thought this was very interesting. I thought this was something that I have struggled with for a long time, depression and Salah or spirituality. Think of someone that's going through a really hard time emotionally, and tell them, get up and go and pray. I know when I went through a very difficult phase, it wasn't the first thing that came to me. It wasn't what I wanted to do, um, when I was sort of caught up in that whirlpool of darkness. And I want to explain a little more, but that's what we're talking about today. Is Salah a cure for depression? And can we reframe this? But before we get into, what is the answer, I really thought it would be really helpful to contextualize everything and sort of break it down as much as we can. Let's deal with depression, and then let's look at Salah. So at the moment, let's park Salah for now. Let's park prayer. Let's park anything spiritual. Let's park anything that's to do with deen to the side, and let's talk about depression first of all. Um, Western psychology talks a lot about mind and body, but what Western psychology seems to leave out is the soul, the ruh. And what Islamic psychology brings into this realm and invites us to do is to go back to our ruh, our fitra. And so that's one of the major differences that I've found between Western and Islamic psychology. So when we're looking at the source of anything that's to do with our mental wellness, we need to go back to our ruh. And so the question is, well, how do we connect back to that ultimately? So let's have a look at depression. I've been through depression, and I'm sure you have at some point gone through an emotional struggle. I call a depression, or any other form of sort of mental illness, if you will, emotional shock, um, severe emotional trauma, cumulative trauma that is built over a number of years and come to a tipping point. I know when I went through depression many, many years ago now, I was living away from home. I was in Sydney, and I was a struggling actor, and did what I could in terms of earning money to pay the rent, and doing auditions, and sort of, you know, picking whether I should have food the one week or pay rent the one week. These struggles, and these mental blocks that you go through. Can I can't, I'm not worthy, I don't think I'll do it, I'm not even going to make it. What's the point of all of this? And what happens is you you begin to feel a sense of hopelessness. And that's what I felt, a sense of hopelessness, severe hopelessness, where you are, even though you're living life on a daily basis, you feel like you're surrounded by this darkness, by this sense of hopelessness. And Ibn Ata'illah, who I've mentioned off and on, I recommend his book Al-Hikam, which is a book of aphorisms. And the first one talks about hopelessness. And essentially what he says is that the reason we find ourselves in a state of hopelessness is because we begin to rely on our own deeds. We begin to rely on other people. We begin to rely on creation. Creation is temporary. Creation is temporal. Creation doesn't have ultimate control. And so when you submit to your own self, and you submit to your own efforts, and you submit to those around you, and you forget the ultimate creator, you begin to dive into the state of hopelessness. And that's what I felt. And what did I do? And what do most people do when they go into the state of hopelessness, depression? I was prescribed Xanax for a while, and I remember taking the medication and thinking to myself, I do not want to be on this for the rest of my life. And so as a result, I began to explore other avenues, other spiritual avenues, other ways of connecting to my mind, to my heart, and ultimately to my spirit. And that came through Reiki, that came through breath work, that came through meditation, and it came through Salah once in a while. And then I'd go back in. And I think one of the unfair things that we do to ourselves and to others is that we begin to think of depression as a flaw or as a weakness in our iman. That is not the case. Depression is not a flaw. It is not a sign of weakness in faith. It is a sign that you are being told or guided or nudged to submit to a higher power, to submit to the ultimate power. But we often don't take heed to that calling, and we then go into this whirlpool, and we begin to move away from homeostasis. We begin to move away from our own balance, and we take medication. We take to alcohol. We take to pornography, and we take to things external to us that we think will fill us up. Perhaps for me, it was a case of really sort of withdrawing into myself. Some people do the opposite and socialize even more and can't stand being alone. And there was a point where I couldn't stand being alone either, and I would socialize a lot, and then I would withdraw completely. But there was one of my and I went to food quite a bit too, and I think about this, and I think, wow, what a time. And every night, this had become a habit. I would buy a chocolate chip muffin every single night for months, and would eat this muffin whole before bed. That was the state of my being at the time. And then something knocks at you, something within you, and it's that soul that is calling out to you. It is your Rabb calling out to you, saying, hey, maybe you want to connect with me a little bit. And it's that sort of nudging that you go, well, what else can I do that really doesn't rely on these external sources to fill me up? So that is sort of my view on depression, that depression is not a flaw. It is an emotional shock. It is cumulative emotional trauma that is stored, that hasn't had room to release. And as a result, we begin to feel hopeless. And as a result, we draw to external things that we consume, that we stick to, that we cling to, hoping that it will fill some of the gap within us. And so then what do? A lot of my teachers and a lot of mashayikh will say, let's take it easy, let's take it slow. You go to any depressed person and say, hey, go and do your prayer. I know I went through it, and it wasn't something that I was drawn to very easily or quickly. But thankfully, I was surrounded by good sohbat and good teachers. And what do some mashayikh do? They take it slowly. And now we come to this bridge. So we acknowledge that we are in emotional shock and in emotional trauma. We acknowledge that we are now looking to external sources to fill some of these gaps internally. We acknowledge that we are in a state of hopelessness. We acknowledge that we're relying now on people around us to give us that validation. And so we're acknowledging all of this, and we're also acknowledging that depression is not a sign of weakness in Iman. Our Prophet ﷺ went through a year of sorrow, Amal Husn, the year that you all know about, where he lost his uncle Abu Talib, he lost his dear wife Khadija radiallahu anha. And I'd love to talk about that relationship. Someone described that relationship as the ultimate love story. But that Amal Huzn, that year of sorrow, we're told in the Quran, in Baqarah, that we will be tested with famine, with loss of property, with trials and tribulations, and that Allah is with those who are patient. It's not an easy thing to be patient, but we know this. We know this to be a part of our life. It was a part of our Prophet's life, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Allah tells us in Baqarah as well that He is with those who are patient. In Allah masabirin. For indeed, with certainty is with those who are patient. We're told to find ease in the remembrance of Allah. And so we're told, it's not a surprise to us, but we are told over and over again that you will be tested, you will be faced with these trials and tribulations, you will have hardship. And we're also being told that, and this was discussed in the previous video, that every soul will be burdened, but that burden is a room for expansion. One of my teachers said very recently that the awliya of Allah, we're told in the Quran that the awliya of Allah neither grieve, they neither fear nor grieve. Well, yes, they will fear, they will feel that fear, they will feel that grief, but they know that grief and sorrow and fear to be expansive. They know that whilst in the seen world, in this temporal world, it's seen as grief and sorrow and fear, but in the unseen world with Allah, it is the opposite. That's quite a reframe, and that's quite a state to be in. So we're not averse, or we're not denying that this doesn't happen. Of course, we're accepting it happened to our Prophet ﷺ. We're given so many du'as to practice that talk of, release from sorrow and grief. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-hammi wal-hazan. Oh Allah, I seek protection from sorrow and grief. Right? So we have these tools that we're told to use when we're going through some hard times. So we know this. So now that we've sort of dealt with what depression is and the fact that it is very much a part of who we are, what do we do? Well, the first step is acknowledging. The first step is to acknowledging that I am going through this. And this is something that was very tough for me, but acknowledging was a huge part of it. That I'm going through this right now and I need help. Ya Rabbi, I need help. When you come with this acknowledgement at a sincere level, I guarantee you, and I speak from personal experience, from first-hand experience, help will come to you. Either by way of someone you'll meet randomly in a gym, or someone you'll meet randomly in a social gathering, in any place, really. Or someone may say something to you online that will click with you. But help will always come and is always there. We just don't see it. And I think the first part of seeing it is just acknowledging that I'm going through this and I need help right now. And especially men find it very difficult to seek help. And by that I mean, you know, therapy, for example. Well, what does it mean to seek help? You know, we, for me, it was therapy. For me, it was seeking someone who was an expert, acknowledging that I was going through an emotional shock and trauma, and to seek therapy, which is what I did. And so perhaps for you, if you're going through this, seeking therapy, and for men, that's a very difficult proposition because we often think, well, therapy isn't a part of our deen, or therapy is for, for crazy ones. I'm not that crazy yet. But we forget that therapy is a part of our deen. One example, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was in the cave, in that dark cave, and Hazrat Jibreel alayhi salam came to him with the first few verses, the revelation. What did our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam feel? He felt a constriction, and he hastened down back home. And who did he go to? Who did he seek comfort from? His wife, Khadija radiallahu anha. And when he described what had happened, he thought something bad had happened. He didn't quite know how to make sense of this. How do I make sense of what has just happened? What did they do? Well, Khadija radiallahu anha listened to him, heard him out. And what did they do afterwards? They went to someone they knew to seek advice, to get some sort of sense, for some sort of sense making. They went to someone. We know this. So we know from the sunnah of our Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam that it is completely okay to seek advice and to seek counsel from someone who knows more than you, or someone that is outside of your immediate sphere and realm. We also know from the sunnah of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I'll get into this a little more in subsequent videos, when he had a troubled time in his marriage with Aisha radiallahu anha, and they were in disagreement. They had sought counsel there was a suggestion of bringing one of the Sahabi in, and Aisha radiallahu anha said, no, I'd rather not, because he knows you, or he favors you anyway. And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam suggested, how about your father, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu? He's your father and my best friend. And so they did. They asked him to step in, to act as the mediator. So seeking advice, seeking help is in fact part of the sunnah. And so I urge you, as perhaps the initial steps, is to seek therapy, is to seek advice, is to seek counseling, so that you're able to work through some of the cognitive biases and narratives that are going on. What next then? Well, the mashayikh have often, as I said, taken it very slow, and they would prescribe certain azkar. They would hand the tasbih, and it could be, as powerful as La ilaha illallah. Do a certain amount. Or some may even prescribe some sort of breath work, but slow and steady, not to overwhelm an already dysregulated nervous system. We need to calm it down. It's like you've stepped into a dark room and you need to turn the light on. You can't see what's wrong in that room unless you have the light on. But how do you turn the light on? Seek advice, seek counsel from those whom you trust. Do some zikr. Begin to talk with your Rabb. Actually talk with Allah. And so, Rabbi, I really don't know what's happening with me right now. I'm going through this and I clearly cannot handle it. Take this away from me. Guide me. Just guide me, because I have no idea what's going on. Like, talk to Allah. And as you begin to do some of these practices, what you're actually doing is turning the light on. Think of a dimmer switch where the dimmer now increases and you're turning the light and the light now comes on. Now you can see and witness where some of the things have gone wrong. What are some of the things that are off in this room? Then we begin to say, am I right with my Salah? No, I'm not really. What is my Salah practice like? It's really not there. It's once in a while. I need to, now I know, now the light is on in the room, I know what's wrong. I need to now address this. I need to practice my Salah. And I want to quickly just also touch on Salah. We're not taught this, but Salah, what does Salah mean? Salah, we're quick to translate as prayer. It's actually not. It comes from the Arabic root word for sila, which means connection or link. So salah actually means a connection, a link. But who are you forming this connection with? Your Rabb. If we can begin to look at some of the etymological meanings of some of the words that we use, it really does give us a different sense. It reframes the whole thing. And it's very powerful to now understand Salah as a connection. And we're told not to just go and pray, we're told to establish it. Salah, how do you establish something? By building on it. One by one by one. By doing it consistently. That's how you establish a thing. So now that you know that the lights are on, now you begin to see what's wrong in the room. And you go, how is my Salah? How is my connection with my Rabb? It's a little, could be better. Let me get this right. Let me begin to establish this connection. That's what you're doing. You're establishing a firm connection. You're establishing that solid connection. And that's when you now go, I need to begin my Salah. And what happens is, as you begin your Salah, it's a struggle. But then you know that it needs to be there. You know it's a connection. You build it. You do it. You continue it. When you don't feel like it, you get up and you do it. You don't feel like it, you get up and you do it. It becomes an established thing. You begin to establish it because you're building that connection with your Rabb consciously, deliberately. And so then you begin now to come back to some sort of homeostasis and balance. That's not to say that you'll go out again. Of course you will. We've been told that Iman is a bit of a peak and trough. It fluctuates. Iman fluctuates because of your qalb, your heart. Again, what is the meaning of the word qalb? That which turns. And your heart is continuously turning. And so when it turns to the other direction, we go to our Salah and turn it back and reorient our heart to the ruh, which is in connection with your Rabb. And then what happens is a lot of this, what we would consider weakness, but emotional trauma that begins to surface again. It isn't a case of, well, you've been through one round of darkness, the dark night of what do they call it? The dark night of the soul. It's not going to happen again. It will happen again. Through some other circumstance, through some other event, you are now ready for the next, you're now ready for leveling up. But the difference is when you are now going through a leveling up, you would have established some practices and you may fall down and pick yourself up because you're a little more aware of what is happening and why it's happening. And so that window between stimulus and response, between the event and how you respond, shortens. Because you know that this is an invitation from my Rabb to connect even deeper. Even though I don't feel like it, I'm going to go and establish my Salah, establish my connection. So that really is, I think it's really important to talk about these two as separate things and then bring them together as the one thing. That there is an answer for your dark night of the soul through your Salah. And how do we get to that point? You're establishing it slowly but surely. The mashayikh would receive, there's one that comes to mind, Sheikh Ahmed Bouchishia from Morocco, I believe, rahimahullah. And a lot of these, who you might call off the street thugs, if you will, would come to him and he'd give them the tasbih. He'd hand them the tasbih and give them, La ilaha illallah, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, different azkar, and build their practice. And people would go, what are you doing? What about the Salah? I said, I know. You don't think I know? I know. But you need to be gentle. Allah is gentle with us. So why are we so harsh with ourselves and harsh with others? He is Latif. So practice gentleness with yourself and with those around you. I really wanted to talk about this, and I hope that it's perhaps brought some more questions. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section. And if any of this resonates with you, subscribe to this channel. And if it doesn't, you don't have to. But I shall be back with another installment of the Sacred Brew. Be gentle with yourself. I think as a parting message for this particular sort of installment, be gentle with yourself. And just acknowledge what is going on. And know that this is part of our temporal life here in this world. And that what in the seen realm, in the temporal visible realm, is difficulty, pain, and harshness. In the unseen realm, again, we're told that those that are God conscious, those that are God conscious, believe in the unseen. And so we know, whilst in the seen realm, in the physical world, it's a difficulty, in the unseen world, it is the opposite. I pray that that we're all granted relief from our grief and our sorrow. Ameen. That Ya Rabbi, grant us relief from sorrow and grief. Ya Hayyu Ya Qayyum. برحمتك أستغيث. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من الهم والحزن. Ya Rabbi, we seek your protection from grief and sorrow. Ya Rabbi, Ameen. Ya Rabbi, those who are watching this, you are Al-Alim. You know what is in their hearts. Ya Rabbi, grant every person that is watching this release and relief from sorrow. Ya Rabbi, Ameen. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. We'll see you again. I look forward to your questions. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.